All right, we are live. Welcome, everybody, to the Gunner Technology Livestream, a weekly tech talk for non-techies and techies alike. I'm your host, Gary Merkins. With me, founder and CEO of Gunner Technology, Cody Swan.
And we're in uniform from, are we in Phoenix, Scottsdale?
Scottsdale. It's officially Scottsdale, Arizona, the lovely Hyatt House in Scottsdale, Arizona. Recommended highly.
There's a fire pit right by us.
And a fire alarm right behind us. So we got all our bases covered.
Eyes here. Not
Shout out to our sponsor, Country Shore Outfitters, a lifestyle brand for anyone who loves the outdoors. We have our weekly contest winner, Bill C. from, I think it was Durham, North Carolina. Bill, sorry if I got that wrong, but Bill's going to get a Country Shore hat coming his way. And if you guys want to enter that contest, check out our Facebook page. And I think that's the only place we have it right now, right?
Yeah, also, yes, that is correct.
Okay.
If you subscribe to our newsletter, there's another way to enter the
So
event.
do that too. Yeah. More ways to win.
Yeah.
And I think that covers everything for the intro. I want to make sure I don't forget anything because I forgot last week to shout out Country Shore, and I apologize for that.
Was there any other?
I should really have this down by now. This is like episode 10.
There should be like a script to follow. But
anyways, we'll go with that. The question of the day is actually a two-part question, and it is, why are Microsoft and Java so prevalent in the private sector, and what is that doing to innovation?
Yeah, and it's interesting because there's probably a lot of people being like, I didn't have that question. Last week I had a lot of questions about jobs, but I didn't really have that question about innovation in Microsoft. But if you didn't know, the Microsoft and Java, collectively referred to as the enterprise languages, are very prevalent among government software, which causes a lot of issues. If you remember Windows XP, you're familiar with some of these issues, and they sort of pervade into the area of software as well. And so what we have is we have a lot of systems in the government that are built on these enterprisey type languages, .NET being Microsoft and Java being Java. And it creates a number of problems. The software gets pretty old pretty quickly, and it's tough to kind of innovate on it as compared to other languages that are available to other developers out there. I think the good example, which I was trying to work into that long spiel, is the thing about the IRS being stuck on Microsoft XP.
Yeah. So, and what are the hurdles there to getting off of Microsoft XP?
Yeah, so a lot of times
you would think it was just a simple matter of having someone come by and upgrade your operating system,
right,
just like you do at home. I mean, what's the big deal?
Right. So, and actually, as you probably know at home, sometimes when you do update your operating system, stuff breaks.
What a big deal, I say. It takes 8 hours and your computer's off.
And that is the reason. So in the case of using the IRS as the example, they had to stick with Windows XP because a lot of the software they were running was specific to XP. Not intended to be that way, but when it was written poorly, and so it didn't conform to a lot of Microsoft's protocols and APIs, meaning when you write software for a particular platform, the platform will give you a set of instructions and say, hey, follow these instructions when you're writing software for our platform. And you should probably follow those instructions. But sometimes you run into situations where either there are no instructions, or the instructions aren't clear, or the instructions are more difficult than just doing it the way you want to do it. And so you don't follow those instructions. Well, that's when you get into serious problems, because then when it's time to upgrade the operating system, you find out there was a reason that there's instructions in place. It's because Microsoft knows when they release updates to their software that they're going to follow the instructions. So any software that sits on their software, if it doesn't follow those instructions, they could potentially break, because those instructions, the off instructions, implementations, may break with the upgrade, because the upgrade doesn't support those, what we call hacks.
I don't want to get conspiratorial here, but is there a sense in which all of this stuff that was done one-off for the government, I mean, there's sort of, as opposed to having Microsoft do it directly the right way, it's been shopped out to the point where all of these different entities have to manage the custom software that was written for the Microsoft operating system that wasn't done the standard way. I mean, I guess the point I'm trying to make is it seems like it's almost an impossible task at this point because there's so much custom software that's going to break and probably so few people who know how to fix that software that I don't even know where would you begin the upgrade process. Well,
it's really weird. You're right. And I don't think the IRS is still on Windows XP. I think they finally migrated off, but for years they were, and years beyond support. So when Microsoft or anyone releases a new operating system, they generally have a support period. They're like, we're going to support this for 10 years. And then to your point, we're not going to have anyone who even knows this anymore. So we're not going to support this. So that came and went for the IRS. And so they were still on Windows XP because their software was tied to Windows XP. And so they had to pay Microsoft some unholy amount of money. I want to say it was in the maybe $1 billion.
A lot of money.
A lot of money to give them to continue support for Windows XP, but just for them kind of thing. So it costs a lot of money. And your point is Microsoft doing that on purpose? I doubt it. I don't think they're complaining. I'm sure they can find some guy who, some guy or gal who has been around since that time who's a thing or two about Windows, but
there's always that veteran who kind of like,
oh gosh,
sits down in their own
and he's
little.
So well, and it is usually a he. The veteran is usually a he. He's so like kind of crudgy and just like growls at you if you ask him a question. Hey, Jim, I know. What do you want? Move.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And I was going to say to your point there, the scope of the prevalence of Microsoft operating systems in the federal government is staggering. I mean, as far as the number of users, the number of different branches that use it, the number of upgrades that would have to happen to get everyone sort of on the latest and greatest, it's a monumental undertaking, which is why it costs billions to do anything.
Yeah, and it's don't really mean to beat up on Microsoft here.
Oh, no. Yeah, I don't want it to come across like that.
It's Microsoft has been around for a while, and they've had a lot of money for a while. And so they have teams and teams and teams and teams and teams and teams of people who their job is to get people to use Microsoft. So they've had a long time to do that, which has kind of gotten their tentacles into the government. Same thing with Java, which is still owned by Sun, used to be owned by Sun. Definitely used to be owned by Sun. Again, Sun is an old company with old in terms of technology parlays, but is an old company that has a lot of money, has had a lot of money for a long time. And so
we talked about them in our JavaScript series, actually.
Yeah,
way back in the day. They go back to the 90s, which is ancient in technology.
Ancient. So they've been since the 90s spreading the gospel of Java and Sun. Oracle is in that category as well. Mm-hmm. To get the government, which is probably the largest single buyer and user of software, to buy and use their software stack. And so the problem with that is those companies aren't as nimble as the open source alternatives. So you've had the government, and by the way the government works is they award a contract, and then when that contract ends, they have to do the bidding process all over again. So they put out the contract for other people to bid on. And so generally, someone completely different could win the contract renewal. And when you're bidding government contracts, cost is a big price. So the winning bid doesn't have the ability to say, okay, your Microsoft stack, your Java stack, it's really old. Let's wipe it out. And we're going to start from scratch, whether that's with a newer Microsoft stack or something completely different. They don't have that luxury because that's a lot of cost. So what they do is they continue the technical debt, which just means you're building on top of what you have to save money in the short term, but really you're just you're putting off the bill,
kicking the can down the road.
Yeah, you're kicking the can down the road, and then again, when Microsoft XP stops being supported, that technical debt comes due, and you're stuck. Maybe 20 years later, you're stuck holding the bill. And technical debt comes in that form as well, the hard cost, but also comes in the form of a cost of opportunity cost. Because if you're building up technical debt, then small things like bug fixes are harder to do. They're not as quick. So that's time, and time is money. You don't innovate as quickly or as often. So you're falling behind your competitors. So there's technical debt in terms of hard costs where you have to maybe even pay someone to figure out what it is years later, but other costs, opportunity costs in innovation and time and things like that.
Well, this is kind of a sidebar too, but it's actually really interesting. This is the discussion we've had with a lot of clients, potential clients over the years, is the fact that you can continually build on top of bad software, and it's cheaper in the short term, but eventually you get to a point where the software is so crufty and broken that the only viable solution is basically to completely overhaul it and start over from scratch, which is what you wanted to do, you know, sometimes it's years ago, where the cost would have been more than the, you know, the cost for the next year or so of just supporting the legacy software. But eventually the total tab ends up being more because you have that much more functionality that you have to rewrite. So it's actually, it's counterintuitive, but it almost makes more sense to overhaul a solution when you see it going downhill, as opposed to trying to kick the can down the road and put it off for, you know, a couple of years, say, to buy yourself some time. I mean, it ends up biting you in the butt down the road.
Yeah, and there is a flip side to that also, where we've seen this.
I can take that for comments, by the way. I'll monitor that.
We've seen this go the other way as well. We've seen this go the other way as well, where devs will come in and they'll want to rewrite the stack for no other reason than there's something more cutting edge out there. And so then you kind of are chasing trends, and you have shops that'll kind of recommend a complete rewrite every year or two. That's not really that's not really helping you either, because you're not building up technical debt, but you're building up a lot of debt trying to pay developers to keep rewriting what you have existing. And you also fall way behind on innovation that way, because instead of building new things, you're rebuilding the same thing over and over and over and over again. So you have to strike a balance there. And kind of what we do when we're evaluating that is we look at what the current technology stack does, and how long it would take to build a new feature or build a new component to it, versus what the latest and greatest can do it in. And also you look for paradigm changes, not just a new programming language, but like a new paradigm in programming itself that kind of fits a language or a stack better than another one. One of the big paradigms that we're seeing right now is the concept called serverless software development, or serverless architecture. And so serverless, you've probably heard time and time again, the web servers, there's web servers. Well, for the non-technical, web servers are just the things that send the web pages or the data for the app that you're using or whatever. That's what just sends it down the internet's pipes, right? And so you have this, it's just a computer. It just sits there and waits for someone to ask it for request. The problem is there's a lot of overhead, or not overhead, there's a lot of waste, because most of the time the server's just sitting there doing nothing. Okay.
I think we're back.
Hopefully we're back.
We love the Hyatt House in Scottsdale, but the internet is a little bit shoddy.
So I don't know where I left off, but I was talking about servers, and you have servers that sit there and send you data when you request it. The problem is the servers sit there doing nothing a lot of the time, and sometimes you get too much traffic, so you need another server. Well, how do you just add another server? And then what do you do with that server when it's not needed anymore? So the idea of serverless, it removes the concept of servers entirely, and basically has one giant server sitting somewhere, just like one humongous, never needs to be scaled server. And again, for the technical people out there who are screaming at me, I'm making this as non-technical as possible. You have one giant server sitting out there, and you have just little slivers on that server that handle one task. Like, instead of a server that handles signing you in, signing you out, retrieving your Facebook likes, retrieving your Facebook video, you have basically microservers that one server logs you in, one server logs you out, one server gets your photos, and one server leaves a comment. And so JavaScript, the language that we use, it fits that paradigm really, really well. And so that's when we kind of look at like, all right, should we move a client to serverless more so than should we just move a client from one language to the other?
And I guess that's an interesting transition too, because the second part of our topic here is the fact that being stuck on legacy software really hinders innovation. And again, this isn't to call out enterprise software. This isn't to call out Microsoft or Java. But how does the fact that so many branches and so many private enterprises are stuck on this software, I mean, how much is that a hindrance for them?
It's a huge hindrance, and the government isn't the only one that saw this. We saw this at Disney. Disney used an enterprise Java implementation, and they had quite a few problems with that, and they splintered off a little bit to try open source, and had a lot of successes going open source. It's usually the bigger the company, the more likely, the bigger the entity, whether that's a company or the government, the more likely they are to use Java or Microsoft or another type of enterprise stack.
And why is that? Is it just the support, the security, the safety, the comfort of going with what they consider a known solution?
I think it's actually all psychological. At this point, it's all psychological because it's no better, it's no more secure. It's just kind of, I don't think anyone ever gets fired for choosing Java or Microsoft as the platform. Like if the project fails, no one's going to point at the guy who decided to go with Microsoft. It's safe. It's just like, and I don't mean safe from a security standpoint. It's safe because everyone else is kind of doing it. So, of course we went with Microsoft. We've been doing it for years. Why wouldn't we do it this time? So it's just, it's the safe option. It's the familiar option. Especially, and then again, if you're a government agency and you've been using an old Microsoft stack for years, when you put out your next bid, you're going to give more points to someone that comes in and say, we have Microsoft experience. So you're kind of cutting off any possibility of innovation to continue on something that's familiar to you. And like we said, we talk about size, the bigger the company, the bigger the entity, the harder time they have pivoting. So they probably have people on staff who are familiar with Microsoft. So if you're a small company and you have two people who are familiar with Microsoft and you're like, hey guys, guess what? We're moving to something totally different. You're going to have to learn something different. Okay, that's training 2 people. But you're talking about now training 20 people to kind of change gears and potentially learn a new system.
And someone just asked what the usage is like for Linux, because Linux is technically open source, but there are enterprise versions of Linux that companies can use. And I have 48% for Windows Server and 40% for Linux. So actually, I mean, Linux usage is pretty high. But to follow up your point there, if enterprise isn't going anywhere, how do you innovate within the enterprise sphere?
Okay, so that's tough, and we're kind of still trying to figure that out. Well, we talked about bidding. When you bid, you have to make a strong case for why you don't want to use an enterprise language, why you want to take them away, if it's an existing system, why you want to take them away from that enterprise system.
It's a hard sell.
Yeah, you have to make a strong case for why your choice is better than what they know. You can't increase your bid based on that transition. You have to bid that in there, or you can't increase the price of your bid. You just have to eat that cost. And you have to have strong examples of similar type applications or systems that you've built using your proposed solution, with strong case studies of people saying, we are so glad that we ditched our old Java stack or our old Microsoft.NET stack and went with this React Native architecture that Gunner Technology created for us. You really have to comfort them and soothe their fears about trying something that may be unknown. The weird thing is, usually when you build this for them, the only thing they're worried about is the user interface and the performance. At the end of the day, they shouldn't care what goes behind the scenes. They just want to be able to they want to be able to use what you've built very quickly and easily. But again, back to my point of it being psychological.
There's that psychological component that people can't get over.
Exactly.
So how do you help people get over that psychological holdup? I mean, I guess other than case studies and saying, here, look, we've done this for people. What are some other ways, I guess, to talk people into the viability of non-enterprise solutions?
Prototypes are big, which is hard with government because you're basically submitting a bid. It's very impersonal. You can't talk to the person. You can't show them demonstrations. You're very limited in what you can do. In the commercial world, we can say, hey, look, I know you're not sold on this React serverless setup, but how long did it take before you saw something when they built your current implementation in Java? Well, it's like 2 months before we saw something. I was like, I'll let you see. It won't be complete, but how about if I build you a prototype in a week? And they're like, no way. Yeah. I'm not gonna charge you. I'm just gonna build a prototype in a week, so you can just see how quickly. Yes, you're gonna have to pay, and it's unknown for you, but you're going to be able to see how quickly you can build things with this new architecture, and you'll be able to actually use it. And that's one way to kind of get over that fear, is to kind of show them definitively that it's going to be using a different architecture, one that they may not have heard of before.
I guess, or they'll learn the hard way and try and innovate software and be stuck on a legacy stack that doesn't have the same level of support or extensibility, maybe. And then they're stuck watching their competitors passing by.
Right, exactly, and that's kind of like, at that point, it's really scary, and it's kind of weird because to recognize when it is your technology stack holding back, because you have the government being one of them and big companies being another one. They're shy of innovation to begin with. So do you have a culture that is holding you back from innovating, or do you have a technology that is holding you back from innovating? And so it's sometimes tough to tell, is your technology stack really bottleneck here, or do you need to branch out and take a leap of faith and kind of start thinking about what you can do to make your business more technologically advanced, more innovative? If you don't, either one of those will be the eventual death of your business, company, or the government won't die. But I don't think I think everyone knows that the government lags in a lot of areas in terms of innovation. I don't think that would come as a shock to anyone.
Well, I think we'll end it there. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure to check out our blog at gunnertech.com. You can listen to a podcast audio streaming of this episode on iTunes. Check out our JavaScript ebook, which is still coming soon because we're working on the covers. We want to make it look pretty for you guys. But that'll be available soon on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iBooks, anywhere ebooks are sold. That'll do it for this week. Make sure to tune in next week, 1 p.m. Eastern. Make sure to sponsor Country Shore, countryshoreoutfitters.com. Thanks for tuning in.